All right. So if you're just coming in, welcome to this conversation with Evelyn Burnett from ThirdSpace Action Lab. We are going to turn it over to Evelyn in a moment. But for your awareness, we are recording this conversation. It will be posted afterwards. If you don't want to be part of the recording, you can keep yourself off camera and stay muted. For the question portion, we welcome you to use the raise hand function, which is at the bottom of your Zoom window under React. If you click the little heart icon that says React, you can choose to raise your hand, and that will indicate to us that you have a question you'd like to ask Evelyn. You can also be posting questions in the chat box, and I will keep a tally of those, and we can share those with Evelyn as well. Evelyn also has the questions that were submitted by all of you when you registered. So thank you so much for sharing those questions. It's very helpful. If you have any tech questions or issues, you can chat. You can send a chat message to me directly. Tomlin, I have a little asterisk in front of my name so that you can find me more easily. And if you need closed captioning, that is also an option. Maybe I'll turn that on right now. So we should have closed captions showing up at the bottom of your screen. All right, I think that's it for our orientation to Zoom. Welcome again, and I'll pass it over to you, Evelyn.
Thank you. Happy late hump day, everybody. My name is Evelyn. I'm co-founder and CEO of ThirdSpace Action Lab and ThirdSpace Reading Room. I begged Tomlin and Andrea to not do the bio thing. I said, no bios after 5. So that's all I'm going to say about myself formally. I really hope that this is conversational. It's after 5 for all of us. And I hope to talk more about who I am as a human in relationship to third places than like a formal bio. But if anybody wants to see the formal bio, it's on our website. It's so nice to see some friendly faces, some folks I've known for a little bit, some folks I've known for a lot of it. So just really honored to be in space with you all. It's not lost on me to spend your time this way after 5, especially in the times we find ourselves in. So shout out to all of you all for being here. As Tomlin mentioned, you can raise your hand at any time, come off mute and talk. You can drop things in the chat. But one of the things that we do at ThirdSpace, it doesn't matter who we're talking to, is we start our time with folks with what we call a soul check. And some people think of them as like a icebreaker of some sort, but it's really more exactly what it says. It's like checking in with our souls. And so I don't know about y'all, but it's been a hell of a day, week, month, year. So it's very important for the human being that is Evelyn Burnett to check in on the soul and just how I'm feeling. So I'm hoping you all will indulge me. Our soul check question for today is, what's your favorite third place and why? I'm going to give the short definition of third places. The Ray Oldenburg sociological definition. These places that are, you think of your first place as your home, your second place as work or church, and these third places that all human beings deserve intrinsically, where you can just be. So I'm going to give the non-super academic definition of third places, and we can talk much more about like Oldenburg's generic designation of great variety sort of things. But for our soul check, if you think about your first place as your home, your second place as work or church, and third places as these places where we can all intrinsically just be. What's your favorite one and why? I invite you to drop your answer in the chat, or if you are feeling so inclined, to please come off mute and tell us about your third place, your favorite third place, and why. It's a surprise question for you all, so I'll kill some time and tell you about mine. My favorite is the ThirdSpace reading room, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But my increasingly favorite one is on Anybody Cool's porch. Porch over patio, because usually the porches are in the front, with a really nice beverage. That could be an adult beverage, or it could just be a nice, cool glass of lemonade, with some really, really great sounds. And those sounds, my favorite sounds are little kids laughing, the sound of birds chirping. The older I get, is just like the most calming sound I can hear right away. And some good music, whatever kind, whatever my spirit and my soul is speaking to that day. So that is my favorite third place, and that is why, because increasingly I just want to be around people in a place where I can be connecting deeply. So I see we have some responses. The library, because of endless adventures. Me too. Tommy's. We have some real legends on the call. Robert Brown, former planning director, City of Cleveland. I'm like trying not to be stargazing, but Tommy's, a place here in Greater Cleveland, Cleveland Heights on Coventry Road. One of my former teammates, the reading room. Libraries, absolutely a critical third place. More libraries, the beach, coffee shops. Third space, Lakewood, Lake Walk at sunrise. Yes, oh man. Water is increasingly a place that I love as a third place, even though I'm not a great swimmer. Walking in the neighborhood, Lake Erie, formal workout spaces, absolutely. Milkshakes and tamales, yes, very much. Balcony, seeing the St. Louis Bay, that sounds amazing. Anybody want to come off mute and share more about their third place? I welcome you to do that now. Gonna keep reading.
I love my neighborhood, so it's great because we all walk, and so you see lots of people that you don't know that well, but whose dogs you've recognized, whose kids you've watched grow up. And I feel very fortunate to have a neighborhood where we can walk and bike and just be in community, a community kind of strangers.
Mm-hmm. Love that. Beautiful. Thank you, Jennifer. Anybody else? My friend Lisa likes coffee shops. We should go to a coffee shop soon, Lisa. And see each other. Tomlin, I saw you come off mute.
Oh yeah, I just want to share really quickly about this place that I'm mourning the fact it doesn't exist anymore. But it was a staple of Southwest Detroit for a while. Nandi's Knowledge Cafe is this revolutionary Black-owned bookstore that, you would walk into it and you didn't really know what you were going to get, because there would be folks just sitting around chatting, kind of shooting the shit, whatever, planning the revolution. And then they would also be serving some food, whatever they had that day. There was also like a clothing store. There were also like artifacts, like art, incredible sculptures, and just stuff all over the walls. So it was really an everything space where you knew you were walking into like the heart of really deep community connections, and people just investing their knowledge and their brilliance, into each other and into that place. So that's Nandi's.
Sorry, I love that. You're like the third person to tell me about Nandi's. I really hate that I never have been. It's crazy. I saw somebody else come off mute a second ago, but now, oh.
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Turisha, in case you're wondering my name is pronounced. Hi, Evelyn. I mentioned the library and third space reading room. I kind of like to lump it in there. I do because I'm an introvert. I like quiet. And I have 3 children under 10. And that is a really hard thing for me to cope with sometimes. So when I like to disappear, I go to the library because it's mostly quiet and just to browse. I remember when I was in graduate school at Syracuse, I would go to Bird Library for hours, even fall asleep on the couch because it was just so quiet. I could do my work, I could do my writing, and just, I could take my food in there. It didn't matter. It was just a place where I could just be by myself. I like being by myself. So going to the beach by myself or going to a coffee shop by myself. And I love Tommy's as well. Now, being a journalist has made me a little bit of an extrovert because I have to talk to people just a little bit. So I do like the programs provided by ThirdSpace. So it's a nice way to get me out of my comfort zone, to stretch me a little bit, especially those intergenerational lunches. I really miss coming to those, but that's what I wanted to expound upon.
Thank you. So good to see you. I'm so glad you joined tonight. Yes, I put in the chat. I love I'm an extreme extrovert, but I value the quiet time, but I usually want the quiet time around people. So very, maybe the flip side. But thank you for sharing. Andrea, I wanted to call on you. You put one in the chat that I would love to give you the opportunity to say a little bit more about, that speaks to a little bit of our origin story, but the Clayton Jackson McGee Memorial. Would you like to share a little bit more about it?
Sure. Hey, everyone. Andrea Kraus. I'm here in Duluth and work at Zeitgeist. We had the pleasure of bringing Evelyn and some of her team up to Duluth in May. And one of the places I always like to take folks that are new to the community is the Clayton Jackson McGee Memorial. It was developed in kind of the heart of our downtown area about 20 years ago. I should say right off the bat, I'm not an expert in this place. There are people who are much more informed, so I will do my best to represent this correctly, but I could be fact checked, and I'm sure I can find a link to put in the chat that is more detailed and accurate. But the Clayton Jackson McGee Memorial is the first memorial of its kind that was built to commemorate the 3 victims of a lynching in Duluth. And it happened in 1918, I believe, 1920. 1920. Oh, thank you. And a number of people kind of resurfaced this historic event about 25-ish years ago, and got together and thought, this is something that's a part of who we are as a community, and part of our history, and a story that we need to remember and learn from. And I think it started with maybe a plaque near a light post where the men were strung up. And it moved to the development in partnership with the city of Duluth and a board, the Clayton Jackson McGee Memorial Board, a development of a plaza on the corner that's an open space, includes some sculptural representation of the 3 men who were killed, as well as some quotes that were selected by the memorial committee. And it has become a place of a lot of community organizing and power. It's an outdoor space, and I love outdoor spaces. I've during the following the murder of George Floyd, it was a space that people naturally gravitated to for organizing and for the start of many marches and movements. And at one point, I know the city was wanting to put a fence around it, and there's been all the discussions around like how to keep this place safe and clean and you know, manage a public third space for safety and who's using it. And the board really pushed back on any fencing of this area, and it's remained open, and it has remained fairly well tended by the community. So there's a lot of eyes on this place and a lot of people who care about it, and it has created a space where it's mostly been well maintained by people in a real grassroots kind of way. So yeah, it's a little bit about that space. If you're ever in Duluth, please let us know, and we can hook you up with a historic tour and talk about it as well.
Thank you. I really wanted to anchor there because my understanding of third places has evolved a lot. So the origin story was when I moved to Cleveland and was a Cleveland Executive Fellow with one of our big foundations, and meeting folks like Robert Brown, Director of Planning for the City of Cleveland. I was introduced, and actually probably a little earlier than that, I was introduced to the Ray Olenberg definition of third places. This first place, second place, third place. And as a, I guess, 19, 20-year-old Black woman, my mind was blown. I had never imagined such a notion. I did not know places like that growing up in Youngstown or in Akron, where I went to school. So this was a very foreign concept to me, but one that resonated with me sort of almost like spiritually immediately, right? But that version, I understood to be the cafes and the coffee shops and like the town squares and like, certainly libraries and parks and things like that, like these free places that ought to be safe and accessible for people. And that holds. But visiting Duluth a month or so ago, on a road trip across the state with some really cool people, really challenged my, challenged and broadened my notion of third places. And 15 years ago, 20 years ago, you see how I tried to make myself a little bit younger, 20 years ago, I would not have thought about a place like the Clayton Jackson McGee Memorial as a third place. And what I recognize is that third places can also be contemplative spaces for us. And we have those all around our country, right? And some of those contemplative spaces are contested because of what they are demanding that we contemplate and what we have to reckon with. And so I'm thinking memorials, public memorials and museums and things like that. And even this Jackson Clayton McGee Memorial, I had such a profound experience there. We were probably there for 20 or 30 minutes. And the physical location of the memorial, is adjacent to like downtown office buildings, and the Zeitgeist space is just a block or so away, and methadone clinics. And I had a really short but deep conversation with some folks struggling with addiction, and particularly a Black man who was originally from Chicago but has been in Duluth for the last 20 years, and who has struggled with addiction, but who is an artist and a survivor, as he described himself. And he had a initially visceral reaction to the memorial, but the memorial did, I think, one of the things that these public spaces and these third places that are contemplative can do, which is to spark a conversation. So here we are, like there's no, if not for this space, I don't meet this person. I don't hear his story. I don't hear what motivates him. I don't hear about his 8-year-old son that is the love of his life. I don't necessarily get there. And so I think, Tomlin, you mentioned the importance of kind of human connection, and I hear that in almost everybody's reflections on their third places, and that these are places that can facilitate human connection, including the human connection that can happen in silence, Miss Phillips, right? Like it don't always got to be like something big and like we're clanking our coffee glasses or whatever. Like they're just the silent connections that we can have with other human beings. And I don't know about you all, but post lockdown, I experience human connection very differently. I experience people. Another one of my third places is my yoga classes. I'm back into the yoga game, real serious. And I can I've tapped in the older I get to just human vibration, right? And like when I'm on the mat in child's pose or something like that, you can like feel the vibration of other folks around you, especially if you're tapped into your breath practice like you're supposed to be in yoga. Because remember, yoga is not about being a pretzel. It's a breath practice, right? It's a state of meditation. It's all of those moves are allowing us to get into meditation and stillness. And so it's just something that your reflections help me remember that a lot of my notions of this concept, which has really changed my life. And it's not a lot of concepts that have changed my life more than the kind of concept and notion of third places, can also be about things that are very, that we can access all the time as human beings. I put this in my notes at the end, but I want to say it now, maybe I'll say it at the end again, that third places for me is also a state of mind. And I think especially in the sort of socio-political context that we find ourselves in, we have to be able to access these spaces at a moment's notice. I know I could not make it professionally right now if I could not access third places immediately. My soul check question for some people around me lately has been like, what gives you instant relief? Like instant relief, not the thing. It's not. And so I'm not looking for the answers, and there's no wrong answers, but I'm not looking for the answer where it's like, I go to my massage therapist and whatever, it's like you find yourself in a moment where you have to have relief immediately. What is the thing you do? And I've gotten some really interesting responses, music and things like that. For me, it's been like this, like when I tug on my ear, like it just allows me like, give me a second, deep breaths, like all those sorts of things. And so when I am looking for relief, I'm looking to be in the state of mind of a third place, a state of just being, right? Because we find ourselves in some pretty sticky situations. And so I really encourage folks to not undermine what you can control, and create those places daily and from moment to moment if we need to. And I actually think that that helps with our creativity and the not just imagination, but radical imagination, as we talk about it at ThirdSpace, that we need to create these spaces and places for other people and out in the public domain, or even in our neighborhoods, or even in our own homes. It's got to start up here. It's got to start with the belief that like I can create these things, these places, and they don't all have to be the scale and size of a Starbucks or a memorial, but like these are spaces that can be claimed individually or between two people or three people. So I want to pause. I feel like I've been talking a lot, and invite any questions, reflections that folks have for me or for each other. Is it Janae?
Janie or Janae.
Okay.
Yeah, I just put this in the chat, but one of the most important things to me is part of the definition of third spaces, third places, being they welcome everyone.
Mm-hmm.
They're not like a gated community. And I love that, because I think enclosed communities are so boring, and people are amazing. So that's one of the most attractive things about this definition. So that's it for me.
Thank you. Absolutely. They have to be creating senses of belonging for sure. And so hopefully we'll continue to talk about that some more. But thank you for sharing that. Mr. Brown.
Hi. For me, since I think many of us value neighborhoods, those third spaces are important because it helps to connect people in a neighborhood and make a group of kind of potentially isolated residents who happen to live near each other into a connected place where you get to know your neighbors. Now that can happen in other ways, in schools and religious institutions, but one way is the neighborhood gathering space. And we happen to, I had mentioned that Tommy's restaurant, we lived 2 short blocks away and walked down there. And one quick experience, after one presidential election that didn't go well, and this was even before the Trump era, this was in the Bush era, we were so depressed when the younger George Bush won a presidential election. We thought, okay, we have to go to Tommy's where there will be people who are feeling just like us and we can commiserate a bit. And we sat down, and one of Tommy's daughters sits down at the table with us and says, "Are you as sad as we are, as I am?" I said, "Yes, that's why we came here." So we could be with people who kind of felt the same way. So, that's just one of the many things that I value in a third place.
Thank you. And we've seen that value reflected in a lot of spaces across Cleveland that you're very much responsible for. I value third spaces for for me to find my people. I also value third spaces for the distance that they can kind of help bridge sometimes for folks that I don't necessarily see eye to eye on everything with. I guess similar story is after a recent presidential election, there's some folks that I got to continue to work with. And when I'm needing to have the most human conversations, the ones that defy grant proposals or reports, or any type of rules, I want to have those in third places. And so we'll talk about this more later. A lot of what we've tried to curate and design at ThirdSpace, Reading Room, the physical location, and as a part of the ethos of ThirdSpace Action Lab, the Grassroots Solutions Studio, is our auntie's living room, because some of the most difficult conversations I've ever had in my life, I've had in my auntie's living room because I feel comfortable. Like if it feels like my auntie's living room, if it feels like my grandma's living room, even with that plastic on the couch, it still facilitates the ability to deal with hard stuff. And so I think that if I'm having a hard conversation or needing to cover some ground with some people, I want to do it at a coffee shop, or I want to do it at the library, or these places that kind of allow for more of the humanity in, different from the boardroom, right? Where you got to have on a certain type of clothes, you got to sit a certain type of way, you got to have a certain type of posture that I think can often be the antithesis of the human connections that we're trying to make. So thank you, Bob. Mr. Andrew, coming to you next.
Yeah, I'm curious if there's anything other that you've come across in literature or otherwise around even an idea of something beyond a third space. So to continue the analogy, like a fourth space, and if it is to almost like to connect an analogy to like 3D versus 4D, and the mind almost being unable to visualize what 4D looks like. If the bridge between this like hypothetical idea of a fourth space being the radical imagination that you talk about, and if there's value in trying to, I mean, obviously there is tremendous value in third spaces. Is there value in looking beyond that as well?
Andrew used to be on my team, y'all. So I helped train him for the tough questions. And the short answer is yes, I have. I actually think there's a group that was funded maybe by Kresge. If Mordecai was here, he'd have it in 2 seconds. But I do think that there's value. And I will say, I actually just talked to Andrew like 90 minutes ago. So it's really heartening that he's here. But one of the things that we were talking about was that I increasingly do not have the intellectual capacity right now. Right now, it'll come back, for things that are too heady, too academic, too scholarly. And because they right now are getting in the way of some of the human connections that I feel really urgent right now. But that said, I think there is some important scholarly work out there about the relationship between third dimensions and fourth dimensions, third places and fourth places. I will say personally, what I'm interested in a fourth dimension, or the space between third and fourth, is the rigor that it will have on our creativity and imagination. And that was another one of my takeaways. I think what is essential for the creation, maintenance, re-engaging, and I'm just thinking back on some of the questions that we got from folks at registration, is we gotta have a lot of creativity and imagination in these spaces. I would venture to guess that most of the spaces that folks named as their favorite, there's something about them. There's an essential element of creativity in them. They can challenge or like activate your imagination. They feel warm, like those sorts of things. And I think that that's what, so I couldn't engage around third and fourth in a necessarily scholarly way just yet, but I would be really excited about the exploration and like the mind exercise of the relationship between those dimensions, the value that human beings get out of those dimensions, how those dimensions might facilitate more connection, depth, nuance, those sorts of things. So thank you for the hard question, Andrew. And I'm going to find the link for fourth dimensions, fourth places. Miss Phillips, you gotta say your first name, pronounce it for me again, so I get it in my head.
Tarisha.
Tarisha. I keep want to say Tarika. Tarisha.
Everybody. But people call me T for short. But yes, since the most recent presidential election, I don't know why we keep going back to this place, but it just going back to the pandemic, the last 5 years were just such a blur for a lot of us. And I think the lingering exhaustion is continuing. I don't know, because I had 2 children in that span of 5 years. I'm just perpetually tired. However, I still feel that pull to reconnect with people, because in that span of 5 years, I relocated my family from Jackson, Mississippi, back home to Cleveland. So there was so much happening. I was like, I need to go back home. I need my family. My children need this more community, more family around them. But now we're going back to the basics. And like you said, the creativity and imagination. And why the library is my favorite third space is because that's where community conversations can be had. Any space can have a conversation. Like, I want my next home to have a front porch. I believe in the front porch because that's where you see people outside, they congregate. And I see new homes being built without porches, and it makes me sad, But my question for all of you here is, when it comes to relying on the creative imagination and memory, when you think about your ancestors and the art of the storytelling and what they did in their time, because every generation and every age has gone through similar issues, and you learn the lessons from them that use them to get through. And you find that you have that inside of you. You have that memory, you have that imagination. You go back to what you knew and what worked. Because it's like, now it's time to move away from the individualistic mindset to get back to the concept of community. So even though I'm an introvert at heart, at nature, it does warm my heart to see people coming back together. Not only are we back outside, but we're coming back together. Like, I recently had the privilege of organizing 3 community roundtable discussions with my nonprofit volunteer group, North Coast Chapter, Tuskegee Airmen Incorporated. And it was centered around the Heroes Project, where we are installing a mural at the local airport. And if any of you have seen the news around the country, more murals and memorials are going up to honor Tuskegee Airmen around the country. Even in Italy, there was recently a memorial erected because that's where they operated, based in Ramatelli, Italy, Ramatelli, Italy in 1940, in the 40s during World War II. But we were doing those conversations to not only enlighten and educate people in the community about Tuskegee Airmen from Cleveland who went and fought overseas and all that they had to endure. And then they brought their talents back home and left the sector and went to have civilian lives and still made a huge impact. But what we want to hear from the people, memory and imagination, how to continue to keep those legacies alive and how to educate one another, because that history was almost erased. But thanks to the national chapters and all the supporters, we said, no way, Air Force, keep those videos in the trainings. They have to know how the military got to where it is today. So my question to you all, how we rebuild the relationships and maintenance of them, and using your memory and your imagination to get the third spaces, back together and move away from that individualistic mindset. So thank you for mentioning that, Evelyn.
Love that. I want to open it up for others before I react, respond. Anybody have thoughts? Great question, a great example. I'm going to be following up with you about that project, but I'll do that offline. Reflections. I will just name, as you all are thinking, one of the questions that had come in prior was around best practices for reactivation of public third places, and also anecdotal evidence from history. Do we have when developing and creating third spaces for people to return to community? And one of my responses to the first question about best practices for reactivating spaces was really about returning to history, right? Like knowing the history of place, of space, because space and place changes and evolves so much sometimes. One of the things, and we'll make sure to include this in the follow-up, that we were talking to the Zeitgeist folks about was our people's practice, and it's our anti-racist community development practice. And we have these sort of 11 dominant narratives that we discuss in the people's practice. And one of them is that there are no blank slates. And we hear that all the time in community and economic development, especially, right? Like that's, once you knock the building down or whatever, like it's a blank slate, right, Bob? Like you just do whatever you want. It's like, no way, we are on stolen land to begin with, right? And it's not to mean that we aren't to develop. It's not to mean that we aren't to redevelop, but we certainly owe, again, literal human beings, at least the acknowledgement of their existence, the ground that they walked, the path that they trotted, and I think that there are these super formal ways of recognizing and acknowledging history that we ought to do, right? Like the scholarly and academic, and the keeping of the sort of public record and all those sorts of things. But I would also really encourage us, and something I've been thinking about a lot lately is oral history. And the role and importance of storytelling and narrative. Here in Cleveland, we're going to be hosting the National Association of National Association of Black Journalists national conference next week. And when I think about journalism in the state of disinformation and misinformation that we live in, I think about the role of storytelling and narrative. And I've been really challenged on narrative and narrative change since I was exposed to that concept, I think in an adult way by the Racial Equity Institute based in Greensboro, North Carolina. And what they teach us in their groundwater metaphor, that, you know, if we're really trying to achieve racial justice and racial equity, that we have to go beyond that fish level, right? Where we're fixing fish, you know, the fish is hungry, the fish is cold, the fish needs to pull his pants up, the fish doesn't come from a 2-parent household, all that sort of stuff, right? Like we're working on the person. And it asks us to at least go to that lake level where we are dealing with policy and process and you know, the culture of things that we're trying to do. But really, if we're trying to achieve that transformation and change that we often throw around in our professional spaces, you know, really laissez-faire, so it seems like, then we have to deal with our racial history, the legacy of our racial history and narrative. And apologies in advance for a very jarring example, especially for folks here in Cleveland, but it's narrative that gets little Tamir Rice killed in a park in 2 seconds. Nobody had enough information to make that decision. Not in 2 seconds, right? Like our brains don't work that fast, not to take somebody's life, but it's a narrative that little Black boys are bigger and stronger and faster and hence more dangerous. They are more of a threat that needs to be neutralized immediately. He was in a 3rd place, by the way. He was in a park playing with a fake gun, which is what the person on the phone said. Like, I think he's playing with a fake gun. It's scaring the shit out of me, but I think he's playing with a fake gun, right? But as we're trying to inhabit public space in 3rd place, for one person, it's a 3rd place. For another person, it's a killing field. It was for that little boy. And so I think that we have to deal with narrative and deal with narrative to combat disinformation, misinformation, understand the places that we're inhabiting, how we're inhabiting them together. It's a lot of work that narrative is doing. I was on a call, I see my friend Kayla Griffin, we were on a call earlier where I was really wrestling. We're thinking about like mindsets and frameworks and all this stuff that, again, at this particular moment in my life just feels so heady. Like I can't wrap my mind. I cannot wrap my mind around this stuff. And what I was kind of sharing on the call and just like lamenting around was like, the question, their version of a soul trek was like, and correct me if I'm speaking out of turn here, Kay, but you know, like what is a word or phrase that has resonated with you lately and why? And my answer was make America great again and bet on Black. And it's not because I agree with Make America Great Again, but I have really been studying the simplicity of those 4 words and how much work they can do, how much history they can draw on, how much they can like grab you in your heart or in your gut and your soul, like the stuff, again, that defies, you know, our scholarly work, right? And Bet on Black, it's like been ThirdSpace Action Lab's response that like, it feels insufficient for me sometimes to talk about just Black resiliency or, you know, shared freedom struggle and all of those things. But what I can bet on is that we're going to show up, we're going to be here. And so I think I can continue down this tangent, but I think that there are these multiple ways that we really have to challenge our notions of space, everything down to ownership, who belongs, who doesn't belong, why don't they belong, how we inhabit those spaces together. And we need to formalize a lot of that, but we also need to do it in those informal ways that I think oral history allows for. I am of the age now, finally, where I need to pick up the mantle of my family Bible. And I'm reading a lot of fiction for sure, but also some nonfiction around the role of those sorts of documents. And I don't know if this is the case for white folks, but for Black folks, if it's a burning bill, if the house is on fire, the thing you run and get the first, besides the kids, is that Bible. Because that Bible is carrying a lot of really, really important history about things. So yeah, I could go on and on, T. Like I think that the history, the narrative, the stories, true and untrue, honestly, are really essential in the maintenance of these spaces, the creation of these spaces, but also the reactivation of these spaces. And I can say more about our space and kind of how we did that practically, but great question. Got my wheels turning. Sorry, I'm gonna pause again. Miss Barrett, I saw you come off mute a little while ago. Good.
I'm good right now. The moment has passed.
Okay.
But
See, I'm
again,
talking too long.
well, I'll find another moment here. Speaking, based on Tarisha just was saying about what they were doing for the Tuskegee Airmen and changing, I think, a baggage claim, luggage area into a memorial and a place of coming together. But it's interesting because just as Trump is erasing and he thinks he's getting work done, we are putting up and we are raising up. So community is so important, you know, because we are going to keep in place what they're trying to destroy. That was it.
I love that. Thank you. Tomlin.
Thank you. I'm going to see if I can articulate this succinctly. There's so much that like so much is coming up for me with your question, Tarisha, and your response, Evelyn. And I really, really appreciate the lens around how Third Spaces facilitate storytelling, like the layers of storytelling that are really required to correct for systems that are erasing, like continually erasing and erasing histories, people's histories and cultures, and just the everyday actions that people have poured into places. And so I'm thinking about that and how third spaces are really spaces to reclaim narratives, like you're saying, and to do so like in a way that can build enough community ownership and community pride around what a community story is that they are trying to tell about themselves versus maybe the stories that have been told about them, or the rationales that maybe get used to say like, oh, this neighborhood or this community, like they don't deserve this kind of space, or they don't need this kind of space, or they don't know how to maintain this kind of space, like those kind of harmful narratives that perpetuate divestment and neglect. And so my question is, like, when folks are really living in that every day of harmful narratives perpetuating violence in their lives, it can really be an uphill battle to like reclaim stories and find the energy and like just the stamina to do the organizing that's necessary, I think, to claim to claim a narrative and a third space that's going to tell a different story. And that's like an ongoing battle. Like even once a third space is created, like it may require like continual, constant, protection. And so I'm just curious, like, how to support that, how to yeah, I don't know, just how we can support community members, like really finding the ability to come together and decide like what is most important to lift up. Because also, I guess the other part of that is there may be differences of opinion, and with so much like history that really hasn't been told for so long, there's sort of like a backlog, right? And so deciding, what to lift up in any given moment and one particular history needs to be shared in a particular space, I think can become quite charged. And so I hope I don't know if that's a succinct question, but
No, I
Hopefully,
love that. I love that
okay.
question. And it's bringing up so much for me. The first thing, and Andrew heard this earlier today, it's heavy on my mind and on my heart. I had a colleague that Bob Brown knows very well. Her name's Linda Warren. She was a mentor and friend of mine for a long time. She's still around. I'm talking to her but she's just on the other side of town. But she used to tell me when I would be on these rages when we worked in community development together, she would say, Evie, it takes the space between notes to make music. Otherwise, it's just noise. And when she used to say that to me over a decade ago, it would enrage me even more. I have to be honest. But the older I get, it's like one of the things that comes to me the quickest, this idea that we gotta take some space. So again, we're back at this word space, but taking the space between notes to make music, otherwise it's just noise. One of the things about this time is so much noise. It's just like we're navigating through so much noise all the time, and a lot of that is the Trump administration, if that's not your guy, but a lot of it is some of our own human creations. Like social media right now just feels like so much noise to me. Like it used to be this cool thing that's like just starting to feel like a black hole or something, that it's like no matter how hard I try to train my algorithm, I still just keep finding myself on this bullshit that I'm like, how did I get here? Like I could not have clicked on this, right? So a lot of noise. So that's the first thing that I would say is like, we gotta slow I always try to give my co-founder a shout out. One of our biggest perhaps clashes and places where we're working on each other is he says that time is a social construct. And that makes me crazy because I'm like, no, you're just late. Okay. But I think the upside of what he's getting at is that like, we got to slow some of this stuff down. And I think to your point, Tomlin, about how much history we have to kind of make up. Like how many of you can identify with, if you go out of the country, if you are so privileged to do so, the thing that I always experience when I'm out of the country is how little Americans know about anywhere else. You get in the car with a taxi driver, they can tell you the headline on the New York Times or your local newspaper, or you go into some remote village in Ghana, the kids speak 5 languages and they can tell you all of our presidents and that sort of thing. And like, we don't know anything about these people. We can travel to places we don't know their president. We don't know the president of Mexico right now, right? Like it's just like a kind of a crazy thing. But I was about to go down a rabbit hole and bring myself back. But the controlling of what we know is knowable, is not knowable quickly. If you are grown up working in a professional space and you did not get the full American history in grade school or middle school, or what that lack of knowledge has turned into is a set of beliefs and values and norms and things that your sweet old grandma or grandpa said. And like, who's to say my grandma was wrong? And it's a tough thing to reckon with, that like grandma wasn't right about everything, grandpa wasn't right about everything, and their reason why is real. It's taken me a lot to reckon with. Thanks for coming, Bob. It's taken me a lot to reckon with, like, even some of the history I was taught by people that I love and that I trust, and they were wrong, like they were not right. And so we have to give ourselves some time. And again, I think the value of third places, one thing that I'll jump to another one of the takeaways I wanted folks to consider when we're envisioning third spaces and places, when we're trying to imagine them or reimagine them, is to tap into our senses. And I added some. There's obviously the sight and smell and sound and touch, but soul and connection, like the literal vibration that we can feel in these places. Because, and then like, how do these places make you feel? When I am in a third place that I really love, I always feel rushed to leave because I want to be there longer. Does that make sense? Like if I'm in a coffee shop that I love, or I'm in a library that I love, or I'm in a park that I love, or I'm in a, like I could stay much longer. And I usually only have to go because I gotta go. Like I really, really gotta go. And so I think that that's a design consideration. That's a policy consideration. It's a programmatic consideration. It's like how can these spaces be designed and curated in ways that make us want to slow down? Because the things we're needing to get after are very hard. They take a lot of time. You know, the warm up alone takes a long time, just like on these calls, right? Like we don't know each other. We getting on us after work. The kids need us, all that stuff. And so we really need to slow down time. And so I could really sort of go on, Tomlin. I want to give some practical examples because I didn't do it the last time when folks were seeing me. So the example I'll give is our building. So the building that the ThirdSpace Reading Room resides in currently was commissioned in 1963 by 9 Black doctors who couldn't practice at our area healthcare institutions, Cleveland Clinic, University Hospital, Mount Sinai Medical Center. But they needed to serve their community. And so they commissioned the first Black registered architect in the state of Ohio. His name's Robert P. Madison. He celebrated his 102nd birthday yesterday. And so like history, story. And they brought their own money together and they built this building and they served their community excellently for a long time. We have people that walk in our doors every single day and like are like, wait a minute, this is my doctor's office. That, you know, and it evokes big emotions, big feelings for people. It was a pharmacy on the first floor of that building. It was doctors and lawyers and dentists and attorneys upstairs, professional folks that serve community in that building. After it was a pharmacy, it was I would like to think of a radical imagination space called Deuteronomy Cafe. That was absolutely critical to the community. It was a meeting space and safe space for activists and artists and creatives and organizers, right? And so I'm humbled daily walking in those doors that like this is truly standing on the shoulders of giants. And so we had to take that honoring into the design of the space. And so I'm gonna share my screen. Let me see if I messed this up too much. We had to take that into design. We have to take that into the programming daily. We have to recognize that a lot of those giants that I named are still living. And I tell you what, Robert P. Madison's mind is sharp as a tack. He can come in and tell you details of those architectural drawings. And so I'll speak also to the speed point that I was making, and I think the importance of slowing down. ThirdSpace will celebrate our 7th birthday on Friday. And it's stunning to me like that we're gonna be here. But this is 6 years ago. And my idea of, I got introduced to this concept of these third places in college. And so I was feeling all smart and, like I got this new sociological term and I didn't grow up with this, but like I'm living in the big city, Cleveland now, and they got these spaces. And I moved to New York and it was all of these spaces or whatever. And so when I came back to Cleveland, I had a sense of urgency of like, y'all don't have enough third spaces. We're about to create one. It's called ThirdSpace, blah, 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 right? And, what do they say? God or the universe really laughs at plans. And so I wanted this to be a thing right away. And the thing did not actually happen until COVID. My very best friend who manages our bookstore now was still living in New York City. She came home and I was like, we have a little space upstairs and I really wanted some help, like bringing that space to life. It was feeling like jail when it was just me, Mordecai, and our first staff person, Maura Garvin. And it just like did not feel like the place that we wanted to be spending long days and long nights. And so I asked Celia and her partner, Sean, our now marketing director, to just spruce the place up a little bit. She said, what's the budget? And, my team can attest, I can be a little cheap at times. I give her this super small budget. And she talks to me and Mordecai about like our aesthetic, and Mordecai has a very bohemian sort of aesthetic, and I have a very clean lines, contemporary feel. But we both felt really, so we couldn't necessarily match up on like the design, but we knew what we wanted people to feel when they were in that space with us. So this isn't this downstairs space, it's an upstairs space, which is, a fraction of the footprint. And we wanted it to feel like grandma's house. We wanted it to feel like the living room. We wanted it to feel like a place that people felt safe and comfortable, and that they saw reflections of themselves and they could get after really deep stuff. And that the space itself will facilitate the things that we're trying to do, which are very hard things. They're even hard things to talk about. And I share that part of the story because down this space that you're looking at here, the canvas was too big for my imagination. The canvas was too big. The budget was too big. Like everything was too big. And I can say that 7 years later. Back then, I didn't realize that. But I think it also speaks to your point, is like sometimes we got to take, or your question, sometimes we got to take a smaller bite. Sometimes we're like trying to shoot the moon with some of our ideas, and we forget like, well, let me try to create a third place in my basement, in my yard, in my backyard, on my patio, like shrink the palette a little bit so we can get experimental and have a little fun, get a little win that can then, so we did that. And because this palette, and there's some really important things that I could really blow our time on, like these, this breeze block is all throughout the building, and folks who are designers and architects, et cetera, like they recognize it immediately. And the folks that grew up going to this building as their, doctor's office or dentist's office, they recognize that these breeze blocks actually used to be on an adjacent wall, but because the building is historic and we, had to adhere to historic preservation guidelines, we had to preserve them. And not that we needed our arms twisted, but so we had to move them. And I think back 7 years later that like, wow, the meticulousness and the time that had to be, the time used for them to preserve this wall, it was like brick by brick. So I could go on a wax poetic on that metaphor, but these are the early days. And a really important feature, because I think somebody mentioned this, I know somebody asked about it in the questions, our space is very intentionally intergenerational. This is my mom here. This is a guy named Mississippi Charles, who I'm actually not sure is still with us. Mr. Page, right? Like these are folks that have been around since day one. We do an intergenerational lunch that was mentioned every last Friday of the month. It started off as like almost like a focus group where we were just trying to sit at the feet of the elders and learn about the good old days. And it's evolved into something that if we were to go, it'd be the last thing to go. It really would, because the blessing and the covering that we get from these elders every last Friday of the month, this is their third place, right? This is their place. They get a little dressed up and come, and we exchange information, and they give us guidance, and they help us imagine the East 105th Street that a lot of designers and architects and engineers talk about, and politicians and journalists and other storytellers talk about in very disparaging ways. And these elders remind us that like, this corridor used to be a corridor where we had the butcher, the baker, the candlestick maker. We didn't have to leave 105 for anything. And they help us refocus on the systemic issues that we need to be dealing with, because it wasn't for lack of people being there and trying. So we feel just extraordinarily grateful to have these folks around. This guy standing here, Jeff Sleesman, is my new neighbor now. So there's things that you will see about these space in these pictures, and we'll make sure to share a lot of this stuff with you all that I'm really proud of, because it's intentionally intergenerational. It's intentionally multiracial. It's intentionally cross-disciplinary. We encourage the diversity of thought and perspective and experience, and on and on and on. Those things are really important. And a lot of people that you see in these pictures are folks that continue to come today. The space looks really different. It took 7 years, you know, my idea that like it's going to be 30 days. There's Miss Brittany. I think we got Miss Dr. Siobhan Nash on the call. You know, we're in service to people in this space, but it wasn't going to look like this right away. And we had to be really responsive to what it is that people wanted to talk about, what it is that people needed in this space, right? And it had to deviate from some of my original, like, oh, I wanted to feel like the French cafes that I experienced and all this sort of thing. But one of the other, I think, design components, and I'm not sure designers would describe it this way, is what you will see in almost all of these pictures is so much joy, a lot of joy. We're dealing with really tough stuff. This is actually at Cleveland Public Library's new Martin Luther King branch that's just up the road from us. Another important third place, but like it's joy, you know, we can deal with hard stuff if we have an ethos of joy. This is Sibo Campbell, the author of Sky Full of Elephants. If y'all want to tap into your radical imagination or your creativity or another third place, I strongly, strongly, strongly recommend Sky Full of Elephants. And, you know, there's some other, I think, actual design components. There's some pictures I could show you guys from way back in the day. This is the team and the team's kids, and not everybody, but a lot of them. This is East 105th that our building is on. You know, joy. These are kids that mostly live in an apartment complex immediately to our west of our building. Everybody thinks it's the quote unquote projects or public housing. It's not. It's really poorly maintained, privately owned housing. And these children, it's not the place where anybody on this call would want their kids to live. And so it wasn't in our design ethos to be a space for small kids. And in fact, you know, we've been asked over the years to like, well, what do you do for kids and all that sort of thing. And as the youngest in my family and no kids of my own, I'm like, that's somebody else's job. But, you know, we have to be responsive. And so these are our babies too. And so we have to have things that allow for this to be a third place for these kids. This is me and Mordecai being silly, but, you know, for these kids, as we do for those elders who knew that building in a totally different way. And joy is certainly the connector. There were some questions about the queer communities. This was a dream realized, and shout out to Dr. Martha Potts, who was on the call, may still be with us. We have to navigate difference. We have to navigate, to your question, Tomlin, difference in point of view, perspective, belief, values, all of that. And I recall in some of the early days of ThirdSpace Action Lab, we've always celebrated Juneteenth because my mom and dad have celebrated Juneteenth my whole life. And Juneteenth happens to coincide with Black Music Month and Pride Month. And so we had been curating this group of elders for these intergenerational lunches for about a year and a half or so. And we had some queer folks on our team that said like, you know, that Friday we want to do something for Pride. And I messed up as a leader. Like I messed up a lot, right? There was a way to facilitate that community for both. I was trying to be protective of both communities, one community being these elders, another community being the LGBTQ community. So it was from the right place, but still got it wrong. And so for us to be having these freedom lectures, and again, shout out to Dr. Siobhan Nash on the call, the Freedom Lecture, Living Out Loud, Black Queer Dreams, and also this Pride on 105 event that we had in this space. There's Dr. Martha Potts there. It was a dream come true. because we kept at it. Like I could have messed up, had a collision with my team, let everybody be mad at me and said, forget it, like whatever. Like let the LGBTQ Center do that. And so it means the world to have a drag show on East 105th Street in the middle of a Black community and buck a stereotype or a narrative that of our relationship to queer communities and Black communities. Like this is the hood, as they say. And folks were really loud and proud. And so it was really such a dream come true for Mordecai and I. You know, color, creativity, all of those things are things that I would really, really encourage us to think about when we are, again, designing these spaces, re-envisioning these spaces, and allowing the people that we want to be in them to be both co-curators in what we are trying to create, but also our accountability partners. I'm sure some more pictures of my mom in here, because she's not far away. Oh, there she is over there again. These are just some other examples of ways that we try to create senses of belonging and create third places, and importantly, liberated spaces in anywhere. We really believe like any four walls, any Zoom calls can be liberated and eventually turned into third spaces. And these are just some of the little ways that we go about doing that, the naming of folks, the showing that we're a part of a team. But back to Miss Gladys. She's my most critical accountability partner, because she gonna tell me when I get it wrong, and she gonna stay on me until I get it right. And this is what these elders really do for us. So we really do embrace their presence, because they are folks who we know care about us very deeply. And they're not going to lead us astray or let us go wrong. And so we've got a ton of these pictures. And again, we'll share these with you. The space has to be intergenerational. It has to feel safe, affirming, creating a sense of belonging for the littlest folks that are in there, to the elders. I've been talking a long time. Again, it's crazy. This mold keeps coming up and being like, girl, you're talking too long. So I want to pause again, because I know we're getting short on time, to see if anybody has any final questions, reflections, and a reminder that we'll make sure to share a lot of the resources and pictures and other things that we have talked about today.
Well, I wanted to offer a final thought. As everyone was sharing their ideas and their reflections, it made me think about the protest space, how movements are created. It starts with organizing. It starts with people from every background coming together, because that's where we, generate the most heat, the most action, and the most response. And we all know what happens when people come together. But the powers that be, like, oh no, we're afraid now. They're coming together. I am seeing what's happening everywhere, across the world. But I think my biggest takeaway is how we are returning to a history of space and place. And that's why the project I'm involved in is so touching for me. Growing up in Cleveland, I went with my dad to these Tuskegee Airmen chapter meetings and events where I met the airmen in person, but I didn't learn about them in school. And it was just really fascinating for me. And then the importance of slowing down. I can't slow down. I got 3 kids under 10. I can't slow down. I try to. I have to create space for myself to slow down. You see all these books behind me? I've got a lot of reading to do. Yeah, shout out to the reading room. I got new books there this year. And for the elders and the children, I really love how we can do things together, because it's about the family, it's about the community. So I love how the bridge is taking shape, through these spaces, because everybody has something to offer, everybody has something to share. So I'm so glad I'm home to be able to participate in these types of groundbreaking developments. And the convention next week, oh, I'm so excited. I'm really glad that we're hosting such, and the Urban League convention not long ago. The city's on fire again, and it's really, really motivating for me to be back and being part of the positive change. So thank you all.
Welcome back. Thank you. Other reflections, questions? I promise I didn't freeze. I'm just trying to embrace the silence like everybody tells me. I'm gonna drop a couple more things and then hand it back to my friends at Zeitgeist. Some other things that I wanted to just draw folks' attention to, and again, we'll share these resources. One of the questions that we got were about some of our the community partnerships that are most helpful. I mentioned my friends, my family, especially my mom and dad, this elders and youth. I also wanted to lift up the Cleveland Freedom Dreams Coalition. Dr. Siobhan Nash was on earlier. She leads our Cleveland Freedom Dreams Coalition. We're super proud of the work that is happening there. Talk about an organizing space. These are some of the oldest civil rights organizations like NAACP, to startups like ThirdSpace Action Lab and Cleveland Votes that are newer, where we are constantly creating third places, where we are like in the practice of creating third places, where we are in the practice. We've shifted our meeting structure even, that it's like, guys, we can report out on email. We can report out on email, we can report out in a Google Doc, but when we have this precious time together, because, you know, time has changed, right? Like if we're gonna be back outside, as the kids say, we want to spend our time very differently. And so in these meetings, we've moved to like practicing radical imagination. Like, how do you do that? And what I've learned in my work is it's not easy, right? Like, it's a good idea, but how you do it, like how we actually infuse creativity into our work, is really important. So I wanted to drop a little bit on the Cleveland Freedom Dreams Coalition. I also mentioned the People's Practice. So this is sort of our compendium of best practices around anti-racist community development, something I'm super proud of. I'm most proud of it because I've helped to create a liberated enough space that I didn't have anything to do with the People's Practice. It's brilliant people around me. It's why I had to bring them to Minnesota with me, because when Tomlin was like, yeah, I heard you on this thing in the People's Practice, I was like, okay, well, I got to bring those people because it's just something that I'm in awe of and I gawk at. But it's there's a ton of resources, including multimedia resources, the scholarly and academic research that it's just endless examples, and we update these quarterly, or we put out issues quarterly, of real practical and inspiring examples of creating third places. So I really encourage folks to take a look at that. I dropped earlier in the chat I talked about Racial Equity Institute. Again, shout out to Dr. Martha Potts, who's on the call. She's always on the call. She's always got our back. But the work of Racial Equity Institute completely changed my life. Like completely, when I got introduced to their sort of framework, I could not see the world the same, could not hear it the same. And so I really encourage folks to take a look at them. They're not the only folks that do race and class, historical, political, and power analyses, but I think they're some of the best. And I name that because race, class, historical, political, power analysis is essential to the creating of third spaces. It's essential to creating belonging and inclusion and those sorts of things. We have to have our analysis, right? So definitely check out their work. We talked a lot about the reading room, so we can include that certainly in some follow-up. But the last one that I would just drop here is Chocolate City, Cleveland. It's a labor of love. I think it speaks to a couple of questions and reflections that I heard in the chat, but certainly is about the history keeping and preservation and maintenance and creation of even new third places. It's a brainchild of Mordecai's. He's very shy about talking about it sometimes, but it is something that I'm extraordinarily proud of. And it's a map, it's an archive, it's conversations, it's keeping the memory of space. If you're on the street that the map is on, and we're going to be making a lot of upgrades to it, it is a physical, like kind of what do they call it, geotagged map that will show you what used to be. And so there were third places all up and down our old street that we have to remember, and some very, very important things that have happened that we have to keep centered and front of mind as we are reimagining and redeveloping place and space. So again, we will be sure to share all of these links. And I even took a stab at answering every single one of folks' questions that were submitted earlier, so we can also follow up with that. But major shouts out to our new family at Zeitgeist in Duluth, the other side of the Great Lakes. I thought we had a beautiful sunrise, but oh man, that sunrise from Duluth was really something. So just honored to be back in space with y'all. And with that, I will hand it back to you to close us out.
Oh, wow. I can't believe we're coming to a close already. I mean, I feel like we could just go on for hours. Thank you so much, Evelyn, for sharing all this insight and just really taking us to all these different places. And thank you to all of you for joining this conversation and sharing your insights. I guess as a closing, I'll share that we are currently collecting feedback for a third space that we are activating here in Duluth. It's a pocket park on 6th Avenue East and 9th Street, if you're familiar with that terrain. And so I'll put a link in the chat. We would welcome your feedback so that we can really make this a community designed space that does so many of the things that we were talking about tonight. And look forward to this recording being posted on YouTube. We'll share it out. Please stay in touch and follow along with the incredible work that Third Space Action Lab is doing and the People's Practice. You can sign up for that mailing list, and then you can also sign up for the Zeitgeist community mailing list and kind of follow along with some of these projects. And if you are in the Duluth area, please join us this coming Tuesday, August 5th for Hillside Night Out at the Freedom Farm. It's going to be a big neighborhood party. So much fun from 5 to 8 at the Freedom Farm. So I think I'll leave it at that. And just wish everybody a beautiful evening. And thank you so much again for this delicious conversation.
Thank you all. Peace, love, and soul power.